Pluto, the Eldritch incubus. From Desert Oracle Radio, this is the Eldritch Republic, our new series that's all about America's strange history and uncanny folklore. I'm Ken Layne. Episode 2, Thomas Jefferson's UFO. Eldritch is a curious word, best known these days for describing a certain gloomy flavor of prose and poetry. The American Gothic writings of H.P. Lovecraft, Nathaniel Hawthorne, Washington Irving, and Edgar Allan Poe. You might call it the country's native tongue, the uncanny. The word eldritch goes back more than half a millennium, with the oldest known usage in a poem of 1508 by William Dunbar, master poet of Scotland. There was Pluto, the Eldritch incubus, in cloak of green. William Dunbar was a macker, the Scottish term for poet, for bard. He was the macker in the court of the Stuart King James IV, the king born at Stirling Castle in 1473 and battle slain on the 9th of September, 1513. We don't know how Dunbar died, or exactly when, but it was in relative poverty. The fate of many a poet, macker or not. Dunbar remains a national hero of Scotland, and you can see a fine statue of him at the Scottish National Portrait Gallery in Edinburgh, dressed in the Franciscan cowl and habit of his religious order. A descendant of this court poet, also named William Dunbar but born in 1749, left his native Scotland for the New World at the age of 22. He had been quiet and bookish as a boy and had earned his master's degree at King's College in Aberdeen by 1767. With the few hundred pounds left to him when his father died, William Dunbar purchased some goods for export and landed at Philadelphia in 1771, working as a merchant. He prospered there and just 2 years later headed for the Mississippi, near the old French fort of Baton Rouge. Dunbar and another expatriate Scot, John Ross, established a plantation in what was then British West Florida. There he found tough, stubborn settlers who spoke an antiquated French. They were the Acadians, recently expelled from British Nova Scotia, the Cajuns. William Dunbar would live on the Mississippi for the rest of his days, though later moving upriver to found another plantation named The Forest and situated 9 miles south of Natchez. Like all such plantations, William Dunbar's farm made use of slave labor, as was the practice and custom of the French, Spanish, English, American, and Indian nations that held sway over the lower Mississippi River at the turn of the 18th century. One of many differences between past and present. William Dunbar raised a variety of crops, as well as a large family of his own, but his favorite work was always scientific in nature. Each crop was an experiment, carefully recorded, investigated for new uses. He created the square cotton bale to make transport easier, and he improved the cotton gin. He designed and manufactured a machine press for the extraction of cottonseed oil, an industry he pioneered. The unique weather and rhythms of river and bayou was of special fascination, and he kept detailed reports on hurricanes, establishing, for instance, the fact of the cyclone's eerily quiet eye. He discovered and extracted the fossilized bones of a mammoth, analyzed the chemical composition of the Arkansas hot springs, and officially defined the Spanish-American border as Surveyor General of what was called West Florida, a sparsely populated stretch of coastal lowlands, swamp, sand, river, and forest, along the Gulf Shore between the Big River and the Chattahoochee out of Georgia. The territory was rough and primitive, the conditions chaotic and often intolerable, as illustrated by the experience of one John Eliot, appointed British governor of West Florida in 1767, but unable to reach Pensacola for 2 years because of turmoil in the colony. It would prove to be his last political appointment. April 2, 1769. Governor Eliot arrived in Pensacola, assuming civilian governmental control. May 2, 1769. Governor Eliot committed suicide in his office. William Dunbar's experiences were often as harrowing, though he never gave up. In 1775, he lost many of his slaves to insurrection, common on the river in those days. In 1778, bandits raided his farm. A year later, in 1779, the Spanish, quote, plundered his plantation, burned his fences, and destroyed his crops. And in 1792, Dunbar moved 124 miles upriver and built his beloved plantation he named The Forest. At his new property, as before, native flora and fauna were cataloged, waterways and natural features surveyed and mapped, and the intertribal sign language of Mississippi River Indians collected and interpreted. Dunbar was the archetype of the field scientist, out in the world, ever alert to strange incidents requiring investigation and evidence. His farm included a chemical laboratory with the finest scientific equipment and instruments manufactured and shipped from Europe, along with the many books he purchased from the Old World. While indifferent to politics and the clash of empires, he made his oath to the new American Republic and, at the turn of the 18th century, became a long-distance friend to Thomas Jefferson. Sharing of weather readings and microscopic samples such as Spanish moss crawling with microbial life was an intellectual pleasure for both men. Jefferson encouraged Dunbar's scientific contributions in a letter written from Monticello on June 24, 1799. It is with great pleasure I have learnt that so distant a post as the Natchez possesses a gentleman so well qualified as yourself to extend inquiries into the regions beyond that. A lover of science cannot lack the requisite zeal to engage his aid in its promotion. We possess little which can be relied on relating to that part of the continent you inhabit, except its mere geography. Its natural history is but little known. Accounts, too, of the Indians of those regions would be very acceptable to the curious. Any information you would be so good as to favor me with on these subjects would be thankfully received. and through the channel of the American Philosophical Society might be communicated to the public. Letters addressed to me at this place near Charlottesville and lodged in any post office of the United States, either in our western country or the Atlantic ports, will be safely forwarded to me. Be pleased to accept assurances of the respect with which I am, sir, your most obedient and most humble servant, Thomas Jefferson. At that point in time, Jefferson was the president of the American Philosophical Society, a position he held from 1797 until retiring in 1814, though remaining a proud member of and contributor to this first American Society of Scientists till his death in 1826. During those decades, Jefferson also founded the University of Virginia. He served as vice president and then president of the United States, too, of which he was also a founder. The two men, Dunbar and Jefferson, would only meet once in life, near the end of Dunbar's life. But Jefferson was pleased to publish a dozen of William Dunbar's fascinating and detailed contributions in the Society's journal. And in 1804, Jefferson assigned a great task to his Scottish-born friend, the grand expedition of the Louisiana Purchase lands of Louisiana and Arkansas. It was on this 104-day journey of discovery that Dunbar studied the hot springs waters and was delighted to find microorganisms, what we call extremophiles, thriving in the scalding water. 2 years later, Dunbar would assemble another such scientific voyage for Jefferson. The Great Excursion, this one was called. Although Dunbar's health was in decline and he was unable to make the trip. If these voyages are little remembered today, they were very much admired and appreciated by Jefferson, who sent Lewis and Clark westward in that same year, 1804, as Dunbar's grand expedition. Through it all, astronomy was Dunbar's abiding passion. At the forest, he built a fine observatory and opened it to fellow scientists and students. Possessing the largest telescope in the vast, wild region, Dunbar spent countless hours studying the planets in the heavens. I have just received from London a 6-foot Gregorian reflecting telescope with 6 magnifying powers, from 100 to 550 times. He proudly wrote to Jefferson in December 1805. It was said by his friends that Dunbar, quote, was happiest when the sun or moon was in eclipse, or when witnessing the dark sky vision of a passing comet. But of all the strange and wondrous occurrences that William Dunbar recorded in his journals, there was nothing quite like the event of April 5, 1800, over the settlement of Baton Rouge. In Volume 6 of the Transactions of the American Philosophical Society, the following report appears on page 25. Description of a singular phenomenon seen at Baton Rouge by William Dunbar, Esquire, communicated by Thomas Jefferson, President, APS. Natchez, June 30th, 1800. A phenomenon was seen to pass Baton Rouge on the night of the 5th of April, 1800, of which the following is the best description I've been able to obtain. It was first seen in the southwest and moved so rapidly, passing over the heads of the spectators, as to disappear in the northeast in about a quarter of a minute. it appeared to be of the size of a large house, 70 or 80 feet long and of a form nearly resembling Figure 5 in Plate 4B. It appeared to be about 200 yards above the surface of the earth, wholly luminous, but not emitting sparks, of a color resembling the sun near the horizon in a cold, frosty evening, which may be called a crimson red. When passing right over the heads of the spectators, the light on the surface of the earth was little short of the effect of sunbeams of daylight. Though at the same time, looking another direction, the stars were visible, which appears to be confirmation of the opinion formed of its moderate elevation. In passing, a considerable degree of heat was felt, but no electric sensation. Immediately after it disappeared to the northeast, a violent rushing noise was heard, as if the phenomenon was bearing down on the forest before it. And in a few seconds, a tremendous crash was heard, similar to that of the largest piece of ordnance, causing a very sensible earthquake. I have been informed that search has been made in the place where the burning body fell, and that a considerable portion of the surface of the earth was found broken up, and every vegetable body burned or greatly scorched. I have not yet received answers to a number of queries I have sent on, which may perhaps bring to light more particulars. And so ends Mr. Dunbar's report. If you're wondering, the 1908 Tunguska event in the Siberian wilderness was caused by an object estimated to be 30 meters in size, or roughly the same size of the Baton Rouge phenomenon, that passed directly over witnesses before apparently crashing in the nearby woods, which the witnesses investigated in person. The Siberian event flattened the forest for more than 2,000 miles around. The explosion was 1,000 times more powerful than the atomic explosion at Hiroshima. In 2013, a 20-meter asteroid exploded some 30 kilometers over Chelyabinsk, central Russia. Without even a direct impact or coming within 20 miles of the surface of the Earth, the explosion injured 1,500 people and damaged more than 7,000 buildings. An event such as William Dunbar describes, the direct impact of an 80-foot-long asteroid at Baton Rouge, would have left the entirety of the lower Mississippi Valley destroyed. The forest would have been flattened and burned for hundreds of miles around, and there would be no one alive to describe its flyover. The shock waves and unsurvivable winds of heat and fire would instantly blot out all life. William Dunbar, 124 miles upriver at his forest plantation, would have perished along with everyone else. Whatever the people of Baton Rouge watched and felt pass low over their settlement in the spring of 1800, we can trust Dunbar and President Jefferson's assessment. This was a singular phenomenon. The first scientifically confirmed meteor strike on Earth would happen just 3 years later in Normandy. Following a dramatic meteor shower widely witnessed there, the French Academy of Sciences sent a young astronomer named Jean-Baptiste Biot to investigate. B.O. interviewed witnesses and collected several of the strange stones that had fallen from the sky, with the largest fragments being mere inches in length and the heaviest fragment weighing about 10 pounds. Thomas Jefferson received thousands of letters each year, often complaining of being buried in mail, unable to catch up, at the mercy of his many correspondents. This was another of them. A report of an interesting phenomenon mailed to Monticello from Portsmouth, Virginia, and dated July 13, 1813, from Edward Hansford and John L. Clark. Most Honorable Sir, we, the subscribers, most earnestly solicit that Your Honor will give us your opinion on the following extraordinary phenomenon. On the night of the 25th July, we saw in the south a ball of fire full as large as the sun at meridian, which was frequently obscured within the space of 10 minutes by a smoke emitted from its own body, but ultimately retained its brilliancy and form during that period, but with apparent agitation. It then assumed the form of a turtle, which also appeared to be much agitated and as frequently obscured by a similar smoke. It descended obliquely to the west and raised again perpendicular to its original height, which was on or about 75 degrees. It then assumed the shape of a human skeleton, which was frequently obscured by a like smoke and as frequently descended and ascended. It then assumed the form of a Scotch Highlander, arrayed for battle and extremely agitated, and ultimately passed to the west and disappeared in its own smoke. We are, Honorable Sir, with sentiments of very high respect and esteem, your most obedient, very humble servants, Edward Hansford, keeper of the Washington Tavern in the town of Portsmouth, Virginia, and John L. Clark of Baltimore. Edward Hansford, according to the National Archives, had served as harbor master for the Norfolk and Portsmouth district by 1805 and still served in that role 5 years later. John L. Clark, aged 36 at the time, was a native of Newport, Rhode Island, and had recently been discharged as a master or midshipman in the United States Navy. Clark was a sea captain living in Baltimore at the time of his death in 1816. And so goes the proceedings of our Eldritch Republic. Eldritch being, as you'll recall, a word that was first recorded by Scottish poet William Dunbar in 1508. Another William Dunbar, descendant of that fierce Scottish clan, reported the singular phenomenon over Baton Rouge. And a couple of old salts in Portsmouth witnessed an eldritch phenomenon of their own. A towering figure of fire and smoke in the form of a Scottish Highlander arrayed for battle. In the summer of 1813, they knew what to do. Report this strange vision at once to Thomas Jefferson, the president of the American Philosophical Society. And finally, an eyewitness report submitted to the Historical and Philosophical Society of the State of New York by John M. Brown of Schoharie, New York. About the year 1790, on a clear summer evening, I was sitting on the stoop playing the fiddle. About 9 o'clock in the evening, a shine of light appeared and increased until it overshone even the light of the meridian sun in some clear day, and enlightened my stoop in such a manner that I might have picked up a pin in every corner. Then I heard a great roaring coming from the north. I started up and looked out from the stoop, and behold, I saw a fiery meteor, or as the Germans call it, a Mindroke. A dragon coming on and passing by at the distance of about 250 yards west of me, about 60 or 70 feet above the cleared ground. It kept along down through the hollow. On the other side of the hollow, it met with the rising of the hill covered with woods and tall trees. There it took a sudden rise and went just over the tall trees so as not to touch them, and on over a kind of flat or level ground until it met with the foot of the noted hill, called by the Indians Owillis Sowlis. Then it ascended higher, ascending as the ground rose, and went over the hill where I could not watch it farther. I had had a view of it about 1.25 miles. It moved about as fast as a common horse in a horse race. The meteor, as I shall now call it, was about 300 yards long in a serpentine shape, excepting the head, which resembled the root of a tree plucked up by force. It had no appearance of a neck, and the body was thick as a bullock, tapering off like a serpent at the end of the tail. The appearance was similar to welding hot iron and sparkling like it. The immense heat warmed through my whole house and left a stench like burning tar and sulfur, which was smelled all the next day. Traditions, superstitions, and fabulous stories are often told of meteors, apparitions, and ghosts, wherein I place but small confidence for want of confirmation. But for the above, mine own eyes and sound mind and body bear witness of the truth I have here related. Thank you for listening, and thanks to our own RedBlueBlackSilver for the soundscapes. Visit desertoracle.com to support this program. Good night.